a couple of papers from this professor at Harvard, Dr. Jing Zhu, and she had conducted the studies with kids, 3 to 6, to basically trying to understand if kids are able to learn from, she called it like conversational technologies. So like Alexa, Google speakers, any of that. And what she learned in what this study shows is that kids can learn as long as the interactions are very, very similar to human interactions. So as soon as the conversation is robotic or doesn't really keep the conversation going, the learning decreases. Most of the technologies, like these studies were before 2024, so like AI was not as advanced as it is now. So I started like realizing that yes, this has real potential to help kids learn a language. Based on that, I connected with her. She confirmed that yes, like all the information in the papers and everything. She was super encouraging that yes, you should do it.
You're listening to Forum Founders. We tell stories of immigrant and first-gen entrepreneurs, investors, operators, and ecosystem builders. And on the show, you hear incredible stories that often go untold. Originally from Paraná, small town in Argentina, Carolina is on a mission to help kids learn a second language at the optimal age. When they're young, their brains are more receptive, and they have the time to explore and grow. After building a successful corporate career in Argentina, she saw a new challenge and moved to the US to earn her MBA at MIT Sloan. Following graduation, Carolina co-founded BetterVet, a mobile vet startup that raised $40 million in 2022 and recently merged with The Vets. Today, she's revolutionizing bilingual education for children with MyPhoenyx, an AI-powered smart toy designed to make language learning fun, engaging, and screen-free. Welcome to Forum Founders, Carolina.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and hopefully encourage some other founders to join us.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to have you here because a lot of the conversation I have are very software focused. And you're doing both software, AI, and hardware. So before we get to what you're building and your company, I would love to just go way back into the time machine and learn more about your upbringing. How'd you grow up?
Sure, yes. So as you mentioned, I'm from Paraná. So growing up in a small town in the 90s, learning a second language was not a thing, honestly. But I was super lucky because one of my friend's mom was an English teacher. So she signed her daughter for English classes at a private institute. And my friend didn't want to go by herself. So she's like, you should come with me. And I started learning English when I was 9. That was definitely the beginning of my career, I could say. I couldn't be here in the US if it weren't because of that opportunity that I had. But at the same time, I started when I was 9. As you can tell, I still have my accent. And that is because now I know that it was a little too late. It could have been better if I could have started learning even earlier. I guess that my own experience deeply shaped why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. I knew that when I was 18, I wanted to go to study to college in Buenos Aires, big city. And I didn't really know what to study. I always was interested like international studies. But my dad was like, you definitely need to get something that you will be able to pay for yourself eventually. So he encouraged me to follow like business administration, and I'm also an accountant. So very like down to earth business. I could probably work anywhere. So I studied that, and when I finished, I joined a company that was later acquired by AT&T.
Okay.
So that's where I joined my like corporate career, and I stayed there for 5 years. I work mostly in finance, so I studied master in finance in Argentina, and I was kind of happy, but at some point I was like, this is really not what I want to do in life.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided, okay, I'm gonna go and try to study an MBA abroad. always wanted to live in another country. So I applied, I got into MIT, and that's when I took the time to really think what I wanted to do with like my life. And I decided I wanted to do what they call a triple jump in the MBA, which
Yeah.
basically means that you will change your function, sector, and geography.
Completely
And
everything.
I was like, yes, I'm gonna do everything new. But because I knew like I didn't want to work in big corporation, I didn't want to work in finance, and I definitely wanted to stay in the US at least for a couple more years at that time.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, I need to do this. And that's when I experienced the first challenge as an immigrant, I could say. And I was listening to another Lakers, I think the founder of Bold Voice, in one of your podcasts.
Hmm.
And she mentioned that um, when you have an accent, it's 60% harder to get a job. And that actually happens to me a lot. So
You
I went
experienced it.
I definitely experienced that. So I went to multiple interviews, um, late stage startups, because at this point I was like looking for like late stage startups in the US, in some role like more like product, something different. And yes, so I started like having all these interviews. And at some point I was lucky, I could say, because MIT reached out to the alumni network. And through that network, someone was starting a company, BetterVet, and was
Yeah.
looking for the first employee. And yes, so he gave me the chance to be the first employee. He gave me the title of co-founder, and that's where I was able to do the triple jump. Uh, Super lucky. And yes, so I at BetterVet I wear multiple hats. I helped raising money. We had the big round in 2022,
Yeah.
and that's where I think I found my passion. I was like, I really like doing this. This is
Yeah.
what I want to do. So when we started working like on BetterVet exit strategy, I started thinking, okay, what's next in my life? And I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to start my own company.
Yeah.
And yes, that's where I am now.
You got this opportunity with BetterVet through MIT and the business school there. Your co-founder, first hire, you're taking basically wearing multiple hats from fundraising to operations for the startup. This was during like 2020, right?
Yes, that was
Okay.
during 2020, exactly
Yeah.
during the pandemic.
During the pandemic. And this was when like telehealth was booming. So it was the whole thesis of the company was that it was telehealth, but for vets, right?
Yes, it was not only telehealth. We also had like we had our doctors. We hired the
Yeah.
doctors and we send them to your house.
Yeah.
So the original idea of the founder was sending doctors to your house, and some in some way telemedicine. I was like at MIT all technology, so I was like, okay, how can we really use technology to leverage this and make it
Yeah.
more like a platform? So that was the part where I really helped the most in developing all the technology for that. It was good. Like at the same time, the other company, the vets, the one that we end up merging, they were starting mostly at the same time. So we were growing pretty much together.
Yeah. And when you mentioned earlier that this was something that you were really attracted to, what was this, like the early stage 0 to 1 building?
I definitely could say it was the 0 to 1 building. Yes, because
Okay.
like on the last year and a half in the company, it wasn't as excited. I could say
Yeah.
definitely the 0 to 1 was what I
Yeah.
really enjoy.
So let's hear about the 0 to 1 that you, after you left the company, you decided to start your own. Now you've already done triple jump. So you can technically do anything, right? Why did you decide to build MyPhoenyx? And what is MyPhoenyx?
Sure. Yes. So, when I was looking at what I wanted to do next, I was like, I definitely know I want to start something from 0 to 1, but now I wanted to do it in a space that in some way resonates more with me. Uh, Veterinary, I have a cat, so yes, pets are great, but it wasn't an industry that I had anything I was not attached to. So I started looking at like, okay, what I'm interested in. Languages has always been there, but I also in my mid-30s, so a lot of my friends are having kids. I could say I'm surrounded by kids and babies. So that definitely started calling my attention. All the frustrations they were facing with like the lack of time, how expensive education is. So I started to explore like what I can do in that area. And talking with them, I realized a lot of them were sending their kids to bilingual daycares, even if they were not bilingual themselves. So they would send the kids to a bilingual daycare where they would learn English and Spanish, but then at home they would have no one to talk to because parents are still only talking English. So that's when it hit me like, oh, there may be a way to actually help kids learn a second language and practice it at home. And with AI, I was going to all these networking events at the same time. So everyone was building AI something. So I was like, okay, if everyone is doing everything, solving all the problems in the world with AI, we may be able to do this with AI. So I started doing a lot of research. And I ran into a couple of papers from this professor at Harvard, Dr. Jing Zhu, and she had conducted the studies with kids 3 to 6 to basically trying to understand if kids are able to learn from, she called it like conversational technologies. So like Alexa, Google speakers, any of that. And what she learned in what the studies shows is that kids can learn as long as the interactions are very, very similar to human interactions. So as soon as the conversation is robotic or doesn't really keep the conversation going, the learning decreases. Most of the technologies, like these studies were before 2024, so like AI was not as advanced as it is now. So I started like realizing that yes, this has real potential to help kids learn a language. Based on that, I connected with her. She confirmed that yes, like all the information in the papers and everything. She was super encouraging that yes, you should do it, you should try it. I would love to see something physical more than just empirical. And I said, okay, my next step is like to start working on this. And I have like 3 avenues. I have like the software piece, the hardware piece, and the retail piece or teddy bear piece, whatever you want to call it. So software was the easier for me because I previously worked with like a software team. So I immediately went to them, started working with them on the software. The hardware piece was a little more tricky because I had 0 experience in that department. And that's where like I could say that my network really helped, because through friends and friends of friends, I start like understanding more and more about what were the different things that I needed to do and how I could like prototype it. So we did the first prototype with the Raspberry Pi. That was like a friend recommendation. We started working together. And then I found someone in Upwork to actually do the PCBA, which is like the board that we sent we got it done in China, and then that's what we are using to test. And at the beginning, it was not perfect, but being able to have something really helped me to connect with more with people that actually had more knowledge about it, because now I was going with something versus just an idea.
Yeah. And what were some of the questions that you were getting help on, especially on the hardware side, from people you knew, advisors, mentors, etc.?
Yes, I would say that first, if, for example, I start reading some papers, now it was like, you can do prototypes with Raspberry Pi. So it's like, okay, great. I can do the prototype with Raspberry Pi. Should I do this like 100 units with this? And they were like, no, no, no. You should do just 1 unit with that. You should learn like if it actually works. But then what you really need to do is a PCBA, like you design. Oh, okay. So I started like doing all the research on PCBAs, and I could come with like all these different microcontroller options, and I could go to them and said, okay, these are all the different options. What are the minimum requirements that you think I need for all these things that they wanted to achieve. And then they would help me outline the requirements. So with all their helps and all these questions, like go back and forth, I came up with like, okay, this is what I need. And it was something I could go to Upwork to say, hey, I need help developing this, versus I just need someone to help me create a toy or
Yeah.
something to talk.
Yeah. Because I think that's probably the hardest part about working with someone, A, you don't know, and B, a job to be done that's like out of the scope of what you're comfortable doing is like getting these to be like, yeah, actually don't go that direction, go this direction. So,
Go this. Yes, and you make mistakes, but at the same time, it's like I made a ton of mistakes, but from all of them, I learned something.
mhm.
And yes, probably if I could have known more, I could have saved a couple of bucks. But at the end of the day, like
Yeah.
you need to get what you need to get, and it's trial and fail and keep going.
Yeah. And then the third piece is this like retail like packaging. So the first was software, second was hardware, third is this. How how do you approach that?
Yes, so that I could say I get a scam at the beginning. So I was looking for people that help me like build like teddy bears, and there are a couple of companies in the US that they basically are the people in between, like dealing directly with like a vendor in China or in any other country. But that didn't work for me. So I went to that approach first, and it was taking forever. I was not getting my sample and everything. But through my network of Argentinians, I ended up reaching out to one of my now advisor that she has a brand of teddy bears in the US, little rebels, just why not to mention them. So she has dealt with all the things that I haven't. And so she's now what I call her my toy mentor, and she's helping me
Yeah.
dealing with like the vendors and distribution and everything. She has all that piece figured it out. So definitely getting the help from her.
And did you do the design of the toy?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
That was that was my design. That it just came because I love reading like fantasy books, so
Yeah.
it it needed to be like a fantasy creature. I didn't want to do just a teddy bear, so a phoenix. And I started looking, and there weren't like any like teddy bears that it's like a phoenix, so it was kind of unique. The colors, like I have some advisors from everywhere, so some people could tell me, yes, you need to make like these colors that kids love. They love red, they love yellow. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. It has all the colors that kids like.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And this toy, where are you in the current process of the company from getting it basically to your customers, to your the children?
Sure. So right now I'm in the testing with like testing with kids. I'm now testing with a previous version of the hardware. We have a better version of the hardware that I will have it in February. So in February, we're gonna do that final testing with kids. And I actually hired a company because it's for kids, you need to get all these inspections and certifications, and the more things you have, better, because you can prove that your product is actually good for kids.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that with an agency that is based in London, but they also do it in Boston. So I'm gonna get all the testing in February, and my idea is to launch a Kickstarter campaign in April to
Amazing.
do the pre-selling. Yes, to start selling the units.
And you mentioned it's for kids who are trying to learn, be bilingual. Um, is there an age range that's like you is fit for the toys?
Sure, yes. I would say the toy can be used by anyone. I have some
Yeah.
adults reaching out that they want a toy, but
Yeah.
ideal, ideally is for age like 3 to 8,
Hmm.
because if we want them to be bilingual, to really incorporate the phonetics of the new language, that's the time where they should. Some people even said like it should be actually even earlier, but because I need the kids to actually talk in some language to interact with the toy. 3 years was my limit, and also for toy production, three years is a good limit. Like if you want to sell something that is for younger kids, more regulated even.
Oh, interesting. Toys are regulated by age groups, is what you're saying.
Yes,
Interesting. Okay.
yes. So 3 years was like, okay, this is a good cut for that. And then I put 8 on the upper level because I think that since it's like a teddy bear, it's a plush toy, maybe older kids are not so interested in that.
Yeah.
It's just a limit I put myself.
Yeah. It might be one of those things, like you said earlier, where it's like 3 to 8 and then like 30 plus will like also be.
Exactly, yes. When they just are over that.
Yeah, right. Totally. Um, I know you mentioned it earlier about hardware, but one of the great things about forum founders and the audience is like audiences, not only immigrant founders, but also early stage founders. And are there any things that advice or lessons about building a toy, a hardware that you can tell the
Sure.
audience?
Yes, I would say that for me, it was a real advantage to have this huge pool of talent and network. And I mean, like the American network, but also like Latin American network for me, but could be anywhere because they have different like pros and cons. Like we all have our own things, and the amount of resourcefulness that I find in um, Latin American talent, for example, is very different. Like they really can do a lot with very little, and that really helps to start something. At the same time, I think that American talent is very like well trained in quality control, in processes, and really gets to the detail. So for me, being able to combine both talent has been key because I was able to get something starting from scratch without spending a ton of money. And then with that, I was able to refine it in the US to really get to the standard that is acceptable.
It's very clear to me that you're really good at unlocking talent from across the board, having advisors, mentors, people you know who can connect you and then also help you along the ways too. So um, that is, yeah, it's really cool to see that you've basically blended your two like environments together in that way. Um, I know we didn't talk about this, but how were you able to fund all this? I don't imagine it
Oh,
being super super cheap to do so. What was that process like for you?
sure. So that's it's a really great point. I applied to Unshackled Ventures, which is a venture capital that invests in immigrants. And the good thing about them is that they invest in the person. So when I applied to them, that was in March last year,
Hmm.
and I was just exploring ideas. I knew which problems I wanted to solve, but I didn't have a product. I didn't have anything. It's really pre-seed venture capital. So yes, through a couple of process, I was selected to be part of the residence, and that's how I got 150,000, and that's what I have been using in the last year to fund everything I have done so far.
Yeah. So Unshackled VC, you applied to them. How'd you find them or hear about them?
Honestly, like it was a friend from MIT that saw it on LinkedIn. I don't know how because I never saw it before that.
Yeah.
Uh, Now I'm really promoting it because on my LinkedIn is everywhere. It's like this is very important for immigrant founders. They all should know about this.
Yeah.
But yes, this friend that he's American, he was not able to apply to this. He's like, hey, I think you should apply. And he literally sent it to me on February 29 last year, which, yes, it was 29 February last year. And it was due on March 1st. So I
Yeah.
had 1 day to do the full application.
Yeah.
But it was very straightforward. And then the process was also very simple because they basically select you. You have two interviews,
Hmm.
um, and that's when they make a decision. Um, I don't know how many people really are applying, how many people get selected.
Hmm.
I also know that most companies don't invest in hardware. At that
Hmm.
time, I didn't have a hardware company, to be honest. I just had
Gotcha.
ideas on problems to solve. Um, so yes,
And again, what you were saying is like they're supporting early stage immigrant founders that they were supporting you, and
yes.
whatever you wanted to build is like they're supporting you first, and then the
And then the idea, yep,
the
yes,
idea.
they are very open. Like if you realize that you want to make changes in your idea, I have friends in this group of on the residents that they through customer discovery they were like, okay, this is not gonna work, so we really need to shift, and they are absolutely okay with that.
Yeah. I have a couple more questions. First one, that's probably a great segue, what you said about Unshackled and what you how you raised to what were some of the big like immigrant founder challenges that you experienced, whether that was
Yes,
with your first company or your second one.
yes, I could say that in my first company, um in the first one, not in this one because I haven't gone through the process of raising money, so maybe in the next chapter I can tell you more about that, but so far I haven't gone through that. The only I just applied to Unshackle, got it. They are focused on immigrants, so being an immigrant was not a challenge, was actually a plus for that particular fund.
Yeah.
But at BetterVet, we pitched to so many VCs.
Hmm.
And yes, I mean, it's the VC industry. Most of them are white men.
Hmm.
And I have little to nothing in common with them. But, um, and you can tell that some of them, like, they could even tell me during a meeting, like, hey, I have a hard time understanding your accent, or can you
Hmm.
repeat?
Hmm.
So at some point, like, my boss was, um, maybe for this part, we can have our CFO doing these explanations or something like that, just to avoid that
Hmm.
moment, you know. But apart from that, um, that I could say was the main challenge. Mm, yes, but not what
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. And then related to MyPhoenyx, um, especially with the growth and how rapidly AI is becoming more and more involved with like in our lives. I'm very curious from a founder who's doing this, being in AI space, but also with hardware and with toys. Where is the, where do you think physical learning and toys and education is headed towards?
Yes. So I think it's all about like integrating it in everyday life. Um, because for me, AI is like how it was internet when I was a kid. So at the beginning, parents were super afraid. It's like, oh, are you letting your kid be on the computer with open internet? Uh, but now it's common. Like parents do that, and no one is questioned that.
Right.
So I think it's the same with AI, and I really think that it's giving us the opportunity to rethink how we want to teach the kids, because the internet, the problem is was all about screens. And
Yeah.
now with AI, we don't need to do all with screens. Like we can actually do interaction, more talking. And that's the part that I think has a ton of value. And I'm trying to really use it to create more value for society.
Yeah. Because it almost unlocks a different part of the learning experience, the brain, when it's removing the screen. Uh,
Yes, it's
whole-
removing the screen, and it's also interactive and personalized. So it has all these advantages that just the internet didn't have.
yeah. I'm excited. I feel like, so my first job outside of college were in education technology. And for the longest time, we've been talking about personalize this, personalize that, and this is finally going to be a reality, including the toys that you are building and the products that you're building is for different languages, for different learning, for different ability, interest level. Like that's all going to be personalized, and that's how uh, kids from 3 to 8 or even older can be bilingual.
Yes,
That's the world
I
that you're
I mean
building.
I hope that's the case. I hope that we can really help kids like learn when they have time, when they have amazing brains that they can fill with things.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I love learning, but every year I'm like, oh, I'm getting slower at remembering stuff, like learning things. So, yeah, 3 to 8 is peak for sure. Um, I love closing out episodes with what are you optimistic about? I ask this because I think first, starting anything from zero from is a very optimistic act, and doing so as an immigrant founder, maybe your network, like you have a very rich network, but some of the founders I talk to move to the US and they're like, I don't know anyone, I don't have a network. And so doing so, I think both combined together, I think this is a great way to close out the episode. So what are you optimistic about?
Sure, I'm super optimistic about the future, about like how technology is making things easier. I could
Yeah.
say that's a word. But about being an immigrant, I could say that it is scary, but when you reach out, most people actually wants to help.
Yeah.
So you just need to do it, and some people will help, some people will not. You just keep trying. But I could say that in general, most people really wants to help others. So if you ask for help, you will get it.
Absolutely. And that's this is why I want to tell a story like yours is like people can also learn from other immigrant founders. If people want to learn more about you, reach out to you, learn more about MyPhoenyx, like where do you want to take them? How can they get connected?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn, so they can use go to LinkedIn, and if not, my personal email is carolina@myphoenix.com. So happy to take any mails. So happy to answer, happy to meet.
Thank you so much for being on Foreign Founders, Carolina.
Thank you so much, Andy. Have a good day.